Came home for the holidays, but my mom opened the door and said, "You weren't invited. This is for family only." I turned around without a word. Minutes later, my sister texted, "Don't take IT personally, you know how you are." I smiled, froze the joint account, canceled the utilities payments, and cut off every card. By the morning, my voicemail was full, and the temp chat was on fire. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and at 29 years old, I never expected to be standing on my childhood porch with tears freezing on my cheeks. After driving 5 hours from Boston to Michigan with a trunk full of carefully wrapped gifts, my own mother opened the door and said those words I will never forget. "You weren't invited. This is for family only." I turned around without a word, somehow maintaining my composure until I reached my rental car. Minutes later, my sister Stephanie texted, "Don't take it personally. You know how you are." That was when I smiled, knowing exactly what needed to happen next. While I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if family drama speaks to your soul. Growing up in Lakeside, Michigan was picturesque on the surface. Our small town had that quintessential American charm with its annual apple festivals, Friday night football games, and neighbors who knew your business before you did. But behind our faded blue clapboard house with its sagging porch, my family life was anything but idyllic. My mother, Patricia, was the undisputed ruler of our household. Standing barely 5'3", what she lacked in height, she made up for in the sharp sting of her words. She had a particular talent for making me feel like an inconvenience from my earliest memories. My father, Robert, was her opposite in every way. Tall, soft-spoken, and perpetually exhausted from his factory job, he chose peace at any price, even if that price was his backbone. Then there was my younger sister Stephanie, born 3 years after me with golden curls and a natural ability to work the family system to her advantage. "Rebecca, why can't you just be easy like your sister?" became my mother's constant refrain throughout my childhood. Easy meant compliant. Easy meant never questioning. Easy meant accepting that Stephanie deserved the last piece of cake, the new school clothes, and the unconditional affection I craved but never received. Money was always tight in our household. The factory where my father worked had been threatening layoffs for as long as I could remember. My mother worked part-time at the local pharmacy, but her income barely covered groceries. By 16, I was working weekends at the local diner, giving most of my paycheck to my parents, while Stephanie enjoyed her weekends at the mall with friends. "This is just how family works, Rebecca," my mother would say when I handed over my earnings. "We all have to make sacrifices." Somehow, those sacrifices always seemed to fall heaviest on my shoulders. School became my refuge. While my social life suffered from the long hours working and studying, my grades flourished. When the acceptance letter from Wharton School of Business arrived with a partial scholarship, I thought my mother might finally show some pride. Instead, she looked at the envelope like it contained a death notice. "Philadelphia? That's just selfish, Rebecca. Your father could lose his job any day now. What about your family?" I went anyway. For the first time in my life, I put myself first, though the guilt followed me all the way to Pennsylvania. Even from hundreds of miles away, I couldn't escape the family dynamic. Monthly calls home were filled with subtle reminders of my absence during hardships, veiled accusations of abandonment wrapped in sighs, and pregnant pauses. Despite this, I still sent money home. When my father finally did lose his factory job during my sophomore year, I set up a joint account with my mother and deposited a portion of my work-study money every month. It wasn't much, but it helped keep the lights on. My roommate Tasha thought I was crazy. "They're adults, Rebecca. They should be helping you through college, not the other way around." I dismissed her concerns. "You just don't understand how things work in my family." After graduation, I landed a position at a financial advisory firm in Boston. The starting salary was more money than my parents had ever seen, and I felt a responsibility to share my good fortune. When Stephanie decided she wanted to attend Michigan State, I paid her tuition in full. When my parents' roof leaked, I paid for the repairs. When their car broke down, I financed a new one. I became the family's unofficial banker, sending money home regularly and maintaining the joint account for emergencies. The thanks never came. Instead, each gift was received as an entitlement, each payment expected rather than appreciated. Phone calls became less about connection and more about financial requests. "Rebecca, the property taxes are due," or "Rebecca, Stephanie needs a new laptop for school. Years passed this way, with me building my career in Boston while serving as the family ATM from afar. I made senior financial advisor by 28, an achievement that went unacknowledged by my family. When I called to share the news, my mother interrupted with concerns about the water heater. The distance between us grew, not just in miles, but in emotional connection. Holidays became complicated negotiations that usually ended with me spending them alone in my Boston apartment, making excuses about work commitments to avoid the awkwardness of going home. Friends invited me to their family celebrations, but I always declined, not wanting to intrude on their traditions while secretly envying their easy familial bonds. This year had been particularly difficult. A relationship I thought might lead to marriage ended abruptly in September. My best friend Alicia moved to Seattle for a job opportunity. The prospect of another Christmas alone in my apartment felt unbearable. So I decided to surprise my family for Christmas. No warning. No chance for them to make excuses or for me to lose my nerve. I bought expensive gifts, requested time off work, and rented a car for the 5-hour drive from Boston to Lakeside. The entire journey, I rehearsed reconciliations in my head, imagining tearful hugs and the healing of old wounds. As I pulled onto our street, I noticed several cars parked in the driveway and along the curb. Through the windows, I could see the twinkling of Christmas lights and the silhouettes of people moving about inside. Music and laughter spilled out into the cold December evening. My heart lifted at the thought of a full family Christmas, something I hadn't experienced in years. I gathered the beautifully wrapped packages in my arms, gifts I had spent weeks selecting with care. A cashmere sweater for my mother in her favorite shade of blue. A leather wallet for my father, engraved with his initials. For Stephanie, the designer handbag she had been dropping hints about for months. I even brought a bottle of my boss's favorite whiskey for whoever else might be there. With arms full of gifts and heart full of hope, I made my way up the familiar cracked concrete path to the front door, ready to finally come home for Christmas. The porch light cast a yellow glow across the peeling paint of the front door as I juggled the packages in my arms to free a hand for knocking. Inside, I could hear the murmur of voices and Christmas music playing, the familiar notes of White Christmas drifting through the windows. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves before rapping my knuckles against the wood 3 times. The voices inside quieted momentarily, followed by the sound of approaching footsteps. The door swung open, revealing my mother in a festive red sweater I had never seen before, a glass of wine in her hand. For just a split second, her face registered shock, before transforming into something cold and unreadable. "Rebecca," she said, her voice flat. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, before I could even smile or offer season's greetings, she stepped forward, partially closing the door behind her as if to shield the gathering inside from my presence. "You weren't invited," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "This is for family only." I stood frozen, the weight of the packages suddenly unbearable in my arms. Over my mother's shoulder, I caught a glimpse of the living room. The tree I had helped my father pick out every year as a child stood in the corner, decorated with the ornaments I remembered from childhood plus many new ones I didn't recognize. My Aunt Marjorie was there, laughing with my Uncle Frank. My cousins Thomas and Eliza were on the couch. And in the center of it all, my sister Stephanie, holding court in a glittering dress, her face flushed with the attention. "Mom." The words caught in my throat. I wanted to remind her that I was family too. I wanted to ask why everyone else was welcome but me. I wanted to point out that I had been paying for the electricity that powered those Christmas lights, and the mortgage that kept this roof over their heads. But I said none of those things. Something inside me, some last thread of dignity, kept me silent. I nodded once, turned around without a word, and walked back to my car with my arms still full of the gifts nobody wanted. Inside the rental car, I placed the packages carefully on the passenger seat, fastened my seatbelt, and started the engine. Only then did I allow myself to feel the magnitude of what had just happened. The tears came silently, sliding down my cheeks as I pulled away from the curb. I made it 2 blocks before I had to pull over, my vision too blurred to continue. My phone chimed with a text message. "Stephanie, don't take it personally. You know how you are. Know how I am." I stared at the message, reading and rereading it as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. How exactly was I the responsible one who had been supporting this family financially for years? The one who had paid for Stephanie's entire college education? The one who kept the lights on and the roof repaired? Another text followed. Mom just didn't want any drama this year. Aunt Marjorie and Uncle Frank brought their new neighbors over. It's important to make a good impression. And there it was, the truth behind the rejection. I was an embarrassment, a potential source of drama that might ruin their carefully cultivated image. Never mind that I was a successful financial advisor who had built a life from nothing. To them, I was still the difficult child, the one who asked too many questions, who didn't just fall in line. As I sat there in the cold car, memories flooded back. Thanksgiving 6 years ago, when my mother had complained about the pumpkin pie I brought being store-bought, while praising Stephanie's lumpy mashed potatoes. Christmas 3 years back, when I'd been seated at the far end of the table next to a distant cousin nobody liked, despite having flown in from Boston and brought expensive gifts for everyone. Last Easter, when I'd called to wish them a happy holiday, only to be rushed off the phone because they were just sitting down to dinner with actual family who made the effort to be here. My phone pinged again. A notification from my banking app confirming that my Christmas bonus had been deposited, part of which I had already transferred to the joint account I maintained with my mother for family expenses. $12,000 sitting there, waiting to bail them out of their next financial emergency. Money I had earned through years of hard work while they treated me like an unwelcome stranger. Something shifted inside me in that moment. The hurt crystallized into clarity, the tears dried on my cheeks. I had been allowing this treatment for years, financing my own emotional abuse, while desperately seeking approval that would never come. I pulled up the navigation on my phone and searched for nearby hotels. The Holiday Inn Express showed vacancies. I made a reservation for 3 nights, dried my eyes, and drove toward the promise of a clean room where I could think. Check-in was mercifully quick. The front desk clerk, a young woman named Melody with kind eyes, must have noticed my red-rimmed eyes but was professional enough not to comment. "Will you be joining us for the complimentary breakfast tomorrow, Ms. Mitchell?" she asked, as she handed me the key card. "Yes," I replied, realizing I had no other plans for Christmas morning. "Thank you." In my room, I unpacked my laptop and spread my financial documents across the desk. For years I had been managing my family's finances alongside my own, keeping meticulous records out of professional habit. Now, those records would serve a different purpose. I opened a spreadsheet and began typing. Joint account with mother, $12,000 current balance. Monthly utilities for family home, $327 average. Credit cards, where I was primary account holder with family as authorized users. 3 cards, approximately $4,200 in current charges. Car insurance payments for Stephanie and Dad, $189 monthly. The numbers told a story of financial dependence that had been going on for far too long. As I worked, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries that should have been established years ago. It was about self-respect. It was about finally acknowledging that I could not buy the love and acceptance I craved from people unwilling to give it freely. I opened my banking app and froze the joint account. I logged into the utility company websites and canceled the automatic payments, making sure to notify them that I was no longer responsible for these bills. I called the credit card companies and reported the authorized user cards as needing to be suspended. One by one, I dismantled the financial support system I had built around my family, my fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard as I severed each connection. There was no pleasure in these actions, no vindictive satisfaction, just a quiet determination to finally establish the boundaries I should have set long ago. When I finished, I drafted an email to my family lawyer in Boston, outlining the steps I had taken and my reasons for doing so. It was nearly midnight when I finally set my phone to silent, crawled into the hotel bed, and fell into an exhausted, dreamless sleep. The weak winter sunlight was filtering through the hotel curtains when I awoke the next morning. For a moment, I lay still, taking inventory of my feelings. The raw wound of last night's rejection still throbbed, but alongside it was something new, something that felt strangely like peace. I had finally taken action after years of enabling behavior, and regardless of what happened next, I knew I had made the right decision. I reached for my phone, bracing myself for the fallout. The screen lit up with notifications, 37 missed calls, 24 voicemails, 49 text messages. I set the phone aside without reading any of them. First, I needed coffee and a clear head to process what would come next. The hotel room coffee maker produced a serviceable cup, which I sipped while opening my laptop. I wanted to review exactly what I had done last night, making sure my actions had been measured rather than merely reactive. The frozen joint account contained $12,347.82. Money I had deposited over the past 2 years for family emergencies. In practice, these emergencies included Stephanie's spring break trip to Cancun, my mother's kitchen renovation, and my father's fishing equipment. Not once had they consulted me before withdrawing funds. And not once had any money been replaced. The utility bills I had been paying included electricity, water, internet, and the cell phone family plan. All told, about $487 monthly for services I didn't use but had been covering for over 3 years. I had canceled all automatic payments and removed myself as the responsible party on each account. Then there were the credit cards. I had added my parents and sister as authorized users on 3 of my accounts years ago. The idea had been to help them build credit and have access to funds for necessities. Instead, the cards had been used for restaurants, clothing, concert tickets, and various luxuries. The current balances totaled $4,582.17. Charges I would pay off one final time. Car insurance for both my father and sister had been under my policy for years, saving them hundreds annually due to my good driving record and multi-policy discounts. I had removed them effective immediately, though I had paid through the current month. As I reviewed these financial entanglements, I created a comprehensive spreadsheet, documenting every dollar I had contributed to my family over the past decade. The total was staggering. $87,342.19, not including gifts, flights home, or smaller expenses I hadn't tracked. Looking at the number in black and white, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Shock at the sheer amount, anger at how it had been taken for granted, and underneath it all, a deep sadness that my financial contributions had never translated into the emotional connection I had been seeking. But today was not about regret. It was about reclaiming my financial and emotional independence. I picked up my phone and began listening to the voicemails, starting with the earliest from last night. "Rebecca, what the hell? The cards aren't working. Call me immediately." My mother's voice, sharp with irritation rather than concern. "Hey, sis. Mom's freaking out about the accounts. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Turn everything back on. Stephanie." Managing to sound both bored and annoyed. "Rebecca, honey, there seems to be some problem with the utilities and banking. Please call when you get this." My father, the only one who sounded genuinely confused rather than entitled. The messages continued, tracking my family's journey from annoyance to anger to the first stirrings of panic as the reality of their situation began to sink in. "This is absolutely childish behavior, Rebecca. Turn everything back on right now or I swear you'll regret it." My mother again. Several hours later, "The power company says the account is closed. It's Christmas Eve, for God's sake. What are we supposed to do?" Stephanie. Indignation giving way to alarm. By the most recent messages, recorded just an hour ago, the tone had shifted dramatically. "Rebecca, please. We need to talk about this. The bank says you've frozen the account. We have people coming over for Christmas dinner. Please call me back." My mother. Vulnerability cracking through her usual armor. "Becca, it's Dad. I don't know what's happened, but we need your help. My card was declined at the gas station. Please call when you get this." The text messages followed a similar pattern, starting with demands and accusations before transitioning to pleas and eventually, something approaching contrition. I set the phone down without responding. This wasn't about punishing them or enjoying their distress. It was about establishing clear boundaries after years of being taken advantage of. I needed time to formulate a response that was firm but not cruel, clear but not vengeful. I showered and dressed carefully, selecting a professional-looking outfit from my suitcase. Then I headed to the hotel's business center, where I printed copies of my financial records, including the comprehensive spreadsheet showing my contributions over the years. I organized everything in a folder, creating a clear paper trail that would be difficult to dispute. While I worked, I called my colleague Mark in Boston, one of the few people who understood my family situation. "You did the right thing," he assured me after I explained what had happened. "They've been taking advantage of you for years. This isn't about revenge. It's about setting healthy boundaries. It doesn't feel great, I admitted. Part of me still feels guilty. That's because you're a good person, Rebecca. But sometimes being a good person means saying no to people who consistently treat you poorly, even if they're family. His words strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about becoming cold or unfeeling toward my family. It was about requiring mutual respect as a condition of my support. It was about no longer allowing myself to be used as a financial resource while being excluded from the emotional benefits of family membership. As I finished organizing my documents, my phone rang again. Aunt Marjorie's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering, unsure what role she was playing in all this. Rebecca? Thank goodness you picked up. What in the world is happening over here? Your mother is beside herself. I took a deep breath. It's a long story, Aunt Marjorie. But the short version is that I've been financially supporting the family for years while being treated like an unwelcome outsider. Last night made it clear where I stand, so I've stopped the financial support. A long pause followed. I had no idea, she finally said, her voice quiet. The way your mother talked, I thought you had abandoned the family years ago. She said you never sent money home, that you were too busy with your fancy Boston life to care about any of us. Her words struck me like a physical blow. Not only had my family been taking my money, but they had been lying about it to everyone else. I had been cast as the villain in their narrative, while they quietly cashed my checks. That's not true, I said, my voice steady despite the new hurt blossoming inside me. I've been supporting them financially since college. I paid for Stephanie's entire education. I've covered the mortgage, utilities, everything. I have records of all of it. Oh, Rebecca. The dismay in her voice was genuine. I had no idea. None of us did. They're at the house now. Yes. Everyone's here. It's chaos. The power company called and said service would be disconnected this afternoon. Your mother can't access the bank account. Your father just got back from the gas station where his card was declined. And Stephanie keeps saying you're just having one of your episodes. I close my eyes, centering myself. Anne Marjorie, would you tell them I'm willing to meet and discuss this? There's a conference room here at the Holiday Inn. I'll book it for noon. You're at the Holiday Inn? Not far from the house. Yes. I came home for Christmas. I brought gifts. My voice caught slightly on the last word, the memory of standing on the porch with my arms full of unwanted presents still fresh. Oh, honey. Her voice softened with genuine compassion. I'll tell them. Noon at the Holiday Inn. Thank you. I hung up, then immediately went to the front desk to arrange for the conference room. Melody was still there, coming to the end of her shift. We have the cedar room available, she said after checking the system. It seats up to 12 people. Will that be sufficient? More than enough, I replied. It's a family meeting. Her eyes flickered with understanding. Holiday family drama? I smiled ruefully. Something like that. The room is yours from 11:30 to 2:30. Would you like us to provide coffee service? Yes, please. And water. As I walked back to my room to prepare for the confrontation ahead, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in my adult life, I was taking control of the narrative. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be the family ATM, silently funding my own exclusion. By 11:45, I was settled in the cedar room, my documents arranged neatly on the conference table. The hotel staff had provided a carafe of coffee, a pitcher of ice water, and enough cups for everyone. I had chosen a seat at the head of the table, a deliberate position of authority that I would never have claimed in previous family interactions. My phone continued to buzz with messages, which I scanned but didn't answer. The tone had shifted yet again, with my mother now vacillating between threats and appeals to family loyalty. If you don't fix this right now, don't bother coming back to this house ever again. Followed 20 minutes later by, Rebecca, please. We're your family. Families help each other. Whatever is upsetting you, we can work it out. Stephanie's messages were more direct. Way to ruin Christmas for everyone. This is exactly why Mom didn't want you here. And then, the power company says they're shutting us off at 3 p.m. unless we pay $267. I don't get paid until next week. Please, Rebecca. My father, characteristically, had sent only one text. I don't understand what's happening, but I know you have your reasons. I'm listening when you're ready to talk. At 11:55, the conference room door opened, and Aunt Marjorie entered alone. Her face was drawn with concern, but she offered me a tentative smile. "They're on their way," she said, taking a seat to my right. "Rebecca, I just want you to know that whatever happens next, I'm here to listen. I feel terrible about last night. If I had known you were coming, it's not your fault," I assured her. "You didn't know because they didn't want you to know. Just like they didn't want anyone to know about my financial support." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I always thought it was strange how they talked about you. It never matched the sweet, responsible girl I remembered." Before I could respond, the door burst open and my mother stormed in, followed by my father, Stephanie, and, to my surprise, Uncle Frank. My mother's face was flushed with anger, her hair uncombed, a far cry from the polished appearance she had presented last night. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, without preamble, remaining standing while everyone else took seats around the table. "Freezing accounts? Canceling utilities? On Christmas? Have you completely lost your mind?" I looked at her calmly, refusing to match her energy. "Please sit down, Mom. I'm willing to discuss this rationally." "Rationally? There's nothing rational about cutting off your family's electricity at Christmas. People are coming for dinner in 4 hours. My father placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Patricia, please, let's hear what Rebecca has to say." She shook off his hand but grudgingly took a seat, glaring at me across the table. Stephanie sat beside her, arms crossed defensively over her chest. Uncle Frank looked uncomfortable, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steady and professional, the same tone I used when presenting financial plans to clients. "I want to start by clarifying my actions. I have frozen a joint account that contains money I earned and deposited. I have canceled automatic payments for utilities that I have been covering for years. And I have suspended credit cards where I am the primary account holder, and all of you are authorized users. I have not taken anything that belongs to you. I have simply stopped giving." "Those cards are ours," Stephanie interjected. "You can't just cut them off without warning." "Actually, I can. They're my accounts. You are authorized users, which means you use them with my permission. Permission I have now revoked." "This is ridiculous," my mother said. "Is this all because I didn't let you crash our Christmas gathering? You're acting like a spoiled child." I opened the folder in front of me and removed the spreadsheet, sliding copies across the table to each of them. "This is a record of my financial contributions to this family over the past 10 years. The total at the bottom is $87,342.19. That doesn't include gifts, flights home to visit, or various smaller expenses I didn't track. It represents mortgage payments when you were behind, utility bills I've covered continuously for 3 years, the full cost of Stephanie's education at Michigan State, car repairs, medical bills, and countless other expenses." My father picked up his copy, adjusting his glasses to study the numbers. His face paled visibly as he flipped through the pages. My mother refused to even look at hers. "We're your family," she said, as if that explained everything. "Families help each other?" "Yes, they do," I agreed. "But help should go both ways. When was the last time any of you asked how I was doing? When I got promoted last year, I called to share the news. Mom, you interrupted me to talk about the water heater. We were having an emergency. It's always an emergency. Every call, every interaction, it's always about what you need from me, never about what's happening in my life, unless it's to criticize my choices." "That's not fair," Stephanie protested. "We're dealing with real life here while you're off playing big shot in Boston." "Playing big shot?" I echoed incredulously. "I work 60-hour weeks to build my career, a career that has funded your lifestyle, by the way. Who paid your tuition, Stephanie? Who covered your rent senior year when you decided you wanted to live off campus?" She had the grace to look slightly abashed but quickly rallied. "So, what, now you're keeping score? Holding it over our heads?" "No. I'm making it clear that my financial support is not an entitlement. It's not something you can count on while simultaneously treating me like an unwelcome stranger." My father finally looked up from the spreadsheet. "Rebecca, I had no idea it was this much. I knew you helped out occasionally, but this." He gestured at the document, seemingly at a loss for words. "It wasn't occasionally, Dad. It was constant. And It wasn't just financial. Every time I've reached out emotionally, I've been rejected or ignored. Last night was just the final straw. Aunt Marjorie, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. Patricia, is this true? Has Rebecca really been supporting the family all these years? My mother's face tightened. She helps out sometimes. She can afford it. She doesn't have a family to support. According to this, Uncle Frank said, speaking for the first time as he reviewed his copy of the spreadsheet, she's been supporting 4 adults, only one of whom is herself. The room fell silent as the reality of the situation began to sink in. My mother stared at the table, her earlier bluster fading. Stephanie examined her manicure, avoiding eye contact with anyone. My father continued to flip through the pages of financial records, his expression growing more distressed with each passing moment. What do you want, Rebecca? My mother finally asked, her voice subdued. Is this blackmail? Pay attention to you, or lose the money. The question hurt, but I refused to show it. What I want is respect. What I want is to be treated like a member of this family, not just its bank. And until that happens, yes, the financial support stops. So you are holding the money over our heads, Stephanie muttered. No. I corrected her. I'm holding myself to a higher standard. I'm refusing to continue enabling a relationship that hurts me. I deserve better than what I've been getting from all of you. And, what about Christmas dinner? My mother demanded, focusing on the immediate crisis rather than the underlying issues. We have 12 people coming at 4. That's not my problem anymore, I said gently but firmly. You made it clear last night that I'm not part of family-only gatherings. So family-only problems are no longer my responsibility. The reality of their situation was finally dawning on all of them. Without my financial support, they were facing immediate practical challenges they were ill-equipped to handle. And beyond today, there would be mortgage payments, utility bills, car insurance, and countless other expenses they had grown accustomed to me covering. This isn't fair to Dad. Stephanie tried. He didn't do anything wrong. I looked at my father, seeing the conflict in his eyes. Dad didn't do anything wrong, but he didn't do anything right either. He stood by while Mom created a family narrative that excluded me. He accepted my financial help while allowing me to be treated as less than. I didn't know, he said quietly, but we both knew it wasn't entirely true. He might not have known the extent, but he had chosen not to see what was happening right in front of him. I think, Aunt Marjorie said carefully, there's something else we need to address. Rebecca mentioned a family narrative. I have to say, the Rebecca I've been hearing about for years, and the Rebecca sitting in front of me don't match. Patricia, you told everyone she abandoned the family, that she never called or sent money home. And there it was, the final betrayal laid bare in the conference room of the holiday and on Christmas Day. My family hadn't just taken my money while excluding me emotionally, they had actively lied about me to others, casting me as the villain in their story while I paid their bills from afar. The silence that followed Aunt Marjorie's statement was deafening. My mother's face cycled through shock, guilt, and finally, a defensive anger. I never said she abandoned us, she protested weakly. I just said she was too busy with her Boston life to stay connected. Patricia, Uncle Frank said slowly, you specifically told us at Thanksgiving that Rebecca never sends money home, that she forgot where she came from once she got her fancy job. And last Easter, Aunt Marjorie added, you said Rebecca couldn't be bothered to call on holidays anymore, that she thought she was too good for us now. But Rebecca just said she called last Easter, and you rushed her off the phone. All eyes turned to my mother, whose face had gone from flushed to ashen. For perhaps the first time in her life, Patricia Mitchell was at a loss for words. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of the games, tired of the manipulation, tired of seeking approval from people determined to withhold it. It doesn't matter now, I said quietly. What matters is where we go from here. Exactly. My mother seized on this, eager to move past her exposure. We need to resolve this immediately. Christmas dinner is in a few hours. Mom, I said, making direct eye contact with her, you're still not hearing me. There is no immediate resolution. That involves me turning everything back on, and things continuing as they were. That relationship is over. What are you saying? Stephanie asked, a note of panic entering her voice. You're cutting us off forever because Mom didn't let you crash Christmas? I'm saying that our relationship needs to fundamentally change before I provide any further financial support. This isn't about last night. Last night was simply the breaking point, after years of being used for my money while being emotionally excluded. My father, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Rebecca's right. His voice was soft but clear. We've been taking advantage of her. I've been taking advantage of her, and I'm ashamed. My mother turned to him, betrayal written across her features. Robert, whose side are you on? This isn't about sides, Patricia. It's about the truth. Our daughter has been supporting this family for years, and we've been treating her like an outsider. Worse, we've been lying about her to the rest of the family. How can you not see how wrong that is? It was the first time I could remember my father standing up to my mother, and the shock of it seemed to reverberate around the table. Stephanie stared at him with wide eyes. Uncle Frank shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Aunt Marjorie gave a small nod of approval. I've made mistakes, my father continued, his voice growing stronger. I allowed the situation to develop because it was easier than confronting it. I accepted financial help without acknowledging it, because acknowledging it meant admitting I wasn't providing for my family the way I should have been. My pride and my weakness have hurt my daughter, and I'm deeply sorry for that. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. This moment of honesty from my father was precious, but years of experience had taught me to be cautious about hope where my family was concerned. So, what now? Stephanie asked, looking between our parents and me. Are we just supposed to lose our electricity and miss our mortgage payment because Mom was rude to you? No, I said firmly. You're supposed to take responsibility for your own finances like the adults you are. Mom is 56. Dad is 58. You're 26 with a college degree I paid for. There is no reason why all of you can't support yourselves. In the middle of winter, right after Christmas, my mother protested. I'm not suggesting you figure everything out today. I'll make a one-time payment to keep the utilities on through January. I'll cover next month's mortgage payment. That gives you 30 days to make new arrangements. And after that, my mother pressed. After that, financial support will be tied to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. I'm willing to help in true emergencies if I'm treated with respect and included as a genuine member of this family, not just when you need money, but all the time. This feels like blackmail, Stephanie muttered. Aunt Marjorie had apparently heard enough. Stephanie Jean Mitchell, that is enough. Your sister has been supporting this entire family while being shut out and lied about. She has every right to set boundaries. Frankly, if I were in her position, I would have cut you all off years ago without any conditions for future support. Stephanie had the grace to look abashed under our aunt's stern gaze. I agree with Marjorie, Uncle Frank said. Rebecca is being more than fair here. My mother, seeing the tide of opinion turning against her, shifted tactics. Of course we want you in our lives, Rebecca. You're my daughter. I love you. If there's been any misunderstanding about that, I'm sorry. Now, can we please resolve the immediate crisis? We have guests coming. The insincerity in her voice was palpable. This wasn't genuine remorse. It was damage control. She wanted access to my money restored without having to make any meaningful changes to our relationship. I'll call the utility companies today, I said, refusing to be manipulated by her fake apology. The accounts will be transferred to your name, with the next 30 days paid in full. That should get you through Christmas dinner and give you time to make arrangements going forward. And the joint account, my mother asked, remains frozen for now. I'll release funds for the January mortgage payment directly to the bank. What about the credit cards? Stephanie asked. I'll pay the current balances, but the cards remain canceled. You'll need to apply for your own. The reality of their new financial situation was sinking in. For years, they had lived beyond their means with my support, creating a false sense of security. Now they would need to adjust their lifestyle to match their actual income or find ways to increase that income. I think, Aunt Marjorie suggested gently, that it might be helpful for everyone to take some time to process all of this. Rebecca has laid out her position very clearly. Perhaps we could reconvene in a few days when emotions aren't running quite so high. That's probably wise, I agreed, gathering my documents and returning them to the folder. I'll take care of the utilities today as promised. We can discuss longer-term arrangements after the holidays. So that's it, my mother said, an edge of desperation in her voice. You're just going to leave us hanging? I'm giving you 30 days of full support followed by the possibility of continued help if our relationship improves. That's not leaving you hanging, Mom. It's offering you a path forward that respects both your needs and mine. As I stood to leave, my father rose as well. Rebecca, could I speak with you privately for a moment? I nodded, and we stepped into the hallway outside the conference room, leaving the others inside. For a long moment, he just looked at me, his eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. I failed you, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. A father is supposed to protect his children, not become their burden. I'm so sorry. The simple sincerity in his words reached something deep inside me, a place where the little girl who had adored her daddy still lived. I never saw you as a burden, Dad. But I was. I am. And worse, I didn't protect you from your mother's from the way she treated you. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that all mothers and daughters have difficult relationships. But I knew. Deep down, I knew it wasn't right. Why didn't you ever say anything? He sighed heavily. Cowardice, plain and simple. It was easier to keep the peace than to stand up for what was right. I justified it by telling myself that at least you were strong, that you could handle it. I never stopped to think that you shouldn't have to handle it, that you deserved better. I felt tears threatening again, and this time didn't try to stop them. I did deserve better. I still do. Yes, you do, he agreed, reaching out tentatively to take my hand. I can't change the past, but if you'll let me, I'd like to try to be a better father going forward. Not for the money, but because I love you, and I'm proud of the woman you've become despite everything. I squeezed his hand, allowing myself to feel a cautious hope. I'd like that, Dad. As we returned to the conference room, I could see that the dynamic had shifted. My mother sat stiffly in her chair, her face a mask of contained fury. Stephanie looked thoughtful, perhaps really considering her own role in the family drama for the first time. Aunt Marjorie and Uncle Frank were speaking quietly to each other, occasionally glancing toward my mother with troubled expressions. I'll be in touch tomorrow about the utilities, I said, addressing the room. Merry Christmas, everyone. As I turned to leave, Aunt Marjorie rose and followed me into the hallway. Rebecca, wait. I'd like to come with you, if that's all right. I looked at her in surprise. You don't need to do that, Aunt Marjorie. I know you are. You're remarkably strong. But no one should be alone on Christmas, especially after all this. Unless you'd prefer to be alone. The kindness in her offer brought fresh tears to my eyes. Actually, I'd love the company. As we walked toward the elevator, leaving my parents and sister behind to face the consequences of years of manipulation, I felt lighter somehow. The hurt wasn't gone, but alongside it was a new sense of freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a boundary and held firm, refusing to sacrifice my well-being for people who didn't value me. It wasn't the Christmas I had imagined when I'd driven to Michigan with a car full of gifts and hope. It was something altogether different, and possibly more valuable, the beginning of genuine change. Aunt Marjorie and I spent the remainder of Christmas Day in my hotel room, ordering room service, and talking more openly than we ever had before. She shared memories of me as a child that were warm and loving, so different from my mother's constant narrative of me as difficult and demanding. You're such a thoughtful little girl, Cher called, as we shared a slice of the hotel's surprisingly decent chocolate cake, always making cards for everyone, always the first to notice if someone was feeling sad. Patricia never saw that side of you, or if she did, she never acknowledged it. Why do you think she's always been so hard on me? I asked the question that had haunted me for as long as I could remember. Aunt Marjorie sighed, setting down her fork. I have theories, but no definite answers. Some of it might be that you remind her of herself, the parts of herself she doesn't like. You're strong-willed, independent, ambitious, all things Patricia might have been if her life had taken a different turn. Mom? Ambitious? Oh yes. Before she married your father, she had plans to become a pharmacist. She was taking classes at the community college, working at the pharmacy to get experience. Then she got pregnant with you, and those plans got set aside. I think part of her resented that, and unfortunately, she directed that resentment toward you. This was a version of my mother I had never imagined, a young woman with dreams beyond our small town. She never told me any of that. Patricia isn't good at vulnerability, never has been. It's easier for her to be angry than to admit to regret or pain. Aunt Marjorie reached across the table to pat my hand. That doesn't excuse how she's treated you, not at all. But sometimes understanding helps with the healing. We were interrupted by my phone ringing. Uncle Frank's name appeared on the screen. Rebecca? Is Marjorie with you? She's not answering her phone. Yes, she's here. Is everything okay? He sighed heavily. Depends on your definition of okay. The Christmas dinner is cancelled. Your mother called everyone and made up some story about a gas leak in the house. The truth is, she's been having a complete meltdown since you left. I'm sorry about the dinner. I said, meaning it. I hadn't wanted to ruin everyone's holiday. Don't be. This has been a long time coming. To be honest, I'm glad it's all out in the open now. I put the phone on speaker so Aunt Marjorie could hear. What's happening at the house? She asked. Patricia locked herself in the bedroom for a while. When she came out, she announced the dinner was cancelled and started calling everyone. Stephanie left about an hour ago, said she needed space to think. Robert is sitting in the kitchen staring at that spreadsheet Rebecca made. I think he's in shock. And you? I asked. I'm processing, he admitted. It's a lot to take in. All these years, we thought. Well, Patricia gave us a very different picture of you and your relationship with the family. Finding out it was all a lie, that you've actually been supporting them financially while they shut you out, it's gonna take some time to wrap my head around it. After we hung up, Aunt Marjorie and I sat in silence for a few moments, absorbing the update. Finally, she spoke. You know, I've always had my doubts about Patricia's version of events. The Rebecca she described never matched the niece I knew. But I didn't push hard enough for the truth, and I'm sorry for that. You couldn't have known. Perhaps not the details. But I sensed something wasn't right. I should have made more of an effort to maintain our relationship independently of your mother. We can do that now, I suggested, surprising myself with how much I wanted that connection. Her face brightened. I like that very much. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking about our lives and experiences. It turned out that Aunt Marjorie, my mother's older sister, had also experienced Patricia's difficult personality throughout their childhood. Many of the dynamics I had faced with my mother had played out between the sisters as well. The difference is, I could leave, Aunt Marjorie explained. I could create distance when Patricia became too much. You were a child. You had no such option. As evening fell, my phone began ringing again. This time it was Stephanie. Can we talk? She asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. We're talking now, I pointed out. In person, I mean. I'm actually in the hotel lobby. I glanced at Aunt Marjorie, who nodded encouragingly. Come up to room 314. A few minutes later, a knock at the door revealed my sister, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, her usual perfect appearance slightly disheveled. Aunt Marjorie, I didn't know you were here, she said, hesitating in the doorway. I can step out if you two need privacy, Aunt Marjorie offered. No, it's okay, Stephanie said, entering the room and perching uncomfortably on the edge of the desk chair. I needed to talk to Rebecca. I waited, giving her space to find her words. I've been thinking about everything that happened today, she began haltingly. About all the things you said, the spreadsheet, everything. And I realized that I've never thanked you properly for paying for my education. For any of it, really. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. Why did you go along with Mom's lies about me? I asked, the question that had been burning inside me since the revelation in the conference room. Stephanie looked down at her hands. It was easier, she admitted. When Mom would say things about you not caring or not helping, it was easier to believe that than to confront the truth, which was that we were taking advantage of you. And, she hesitated, then continued, it made me feel less guilty about getting the better treatment. If you were the bad daughter who abandoned the family, then it made sense that I was the good daughter who deserved everything. Her honesty was surprising and painful. All these years, my family had not only exploited my financial support, but had actively constructed a narrative that justified their treatment of me. Did you ever defend me? I asked, needing to know if there had been even a moment when my sister had stood up for me. Tears welled in her eyes. No, she whispered. I never did. And I'm sorry for that, Rebecca. I really am. The apology felt genuine, but I wasn't ready to simply forgive and move forward as if years of hurt could be erased with a few words. I appreciate you saying that, Stephanie. It's going to take time for me to process everything and figure out what kind of relationship I want with you and with Mom and Dad going forward. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about things differently now. Seeing that spreadsheet, hearing Uncle Frank and Aunt Marjorie's reactions, it made me realize how wrong it all was. After Stephanie left, promising to call in a few days after we'd all had time to reflect, Aunt Marjorie and I ordered dinner from a local restaurant that was open on Christmas. We ate in the hotel room, sharing stories and gradually shifting to lighter topics. By the time she left to return to her own home, we had made plans to meet for lunch the following week, independent of any family drama resolution. Alone in my hotel room that night, I finally allowed myself to fully feel the emotional impact of the day. I cried for the little girl who had never been enough for her mother, for the young woman who had tried to buy love with financial support for all the holidays spent alone because I wasn't family-only material. But beneath the grief was something new, something that felt like the beginning of healing. I had finally spoken my truth. I had set boundaries that honored my worth. I had refused to continue participating in relationships that diminished me. And in doing so, I had opened the door to authentic connections with family members like Aunt Marjorie, and potentially even my father, who seemed genuinely remorseful. It wasn't the Christmas miracle I had hoped for when I drove to Michigan with a car full of gifts. It was messier, more painful, but ultimately more meaningful. Instead of another holiday pretending everything was fine while being treated as less than, I had initiated a process of genuine change. As I prepared for bed, I received one final text message for the day. It was from my father. I know words aren't enough, but I want you to know I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself today. It took courage I've never had. If you're willing, I'd like to try to rebuild our relationship, not because of money, but because I miss my daughter. Sleep well, Rebecca. I held the phone to my chest, allowing myself to feel a cautious hope. This Christmas had torn apart the false narrative my family had constructed, exposing painful truths that could no longer be ignored. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet. But perhaps it was a necessary beginning. 6 months after that fateful Christmas, I stood in my Boston apartment gazing out at the skyline. Summer sunshine glinted off the harbor waters in the distance, a perfect June day unfolding before me. So much had changed since I'd driven to Michigan with a heart full of hope and a car full of unwanted gifts. Professionally, I had thrived. The confidence that came from finally establishing boundaries in my personal life had spilled over into my career. I had secured 3 major new clients, received a substantial promotion, and was now managing my own team at the firm. My boss had commented more than once on my new assertiveness, unaware of the personal transformation that had made it possible. My apartment reflected the changes as well. I had always maintained a beautiful space, but it had been functionally a hotel room, a place to sleep between workdays. Now it felt like a home. Fresh flowers and colorful vases brightened the kitchen counter. Photos adorned walls that had previously been bare. Not family photos, not yet, but images of friends, of places I had visited, of moments that brought me joy. My relationship with my family had evolved in ways both expected and surprising. The 30-day grace period I had promised at Christmas had passed, and as agreed, I had ceased all regular financial support. The transition had been difficult for them, particularly my mother, who had been forced to return to work part-time at the pharmacy to help make ends meet. My father had been true to his word about wanting to rebuild our relationship. We spoke weekly now, our conversations initially awkward but gradually warming into genuine connection. He had found a new job as a night security guard at a local manufacturing plant, a position that paid less than his factory work but offered stability. He never asked for money, though I had helped once when his car needed unexpected repairs, a gesture freely given rather than coerced. Stephanie had surprised me most of all. After our conversation at the hotel, she had taken time to reflect on her role in the family dynamic. In February, she had called to tell me she had found a full-time position using her marketing degree, her first real career job after years of part-time work supplemented by my financial support. Last month, she had repaid a small portion of what I had contributed to her education, not because I had asked, but because she wanted to demonstrate her commitment to a more balanced relationship. My mother remained the most resistant to change. Without direct access to my money, She had been forced to adjust her lifestyle and her narrative about me. Our limited communications were still strained, filled with subtle digs and passive-aggressive comments. But there was a difference now. I no longer accepted her framing of me as the difficult daughter, the family disappointment. Each attempt at manipulation was met with calm clarity, each guilt trip returned to sender. The most unexpected development had been my relationship with Aunt Marjorie. True to our Christmas Day promise, we had maintained regular contact independent of the rest of the family. She had visited me in Boston twice, and we spoke on the phone weekly. She had become the family connection I had always craved, offering wisdom, support, and genuine affection without conditions. My phone chimed with a text message, pulling me from my reflections. It was from Alicia, my friend who had moved to Seattle months ago. Video call in 10? Need your financial genius for apartment hunting advice. I smiled, settling onto my couch with a cup of coffee. Another change in the aftermath of Christmas. I had begun investing more deeply in friendships that nourished rather than depleted me. Alicia and I spoke regularly now, our connection stronger despite the distance. As I waited for her call, I thought about the profound lessons of the past 6 months. I had learned that boundaries aren't selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. I had discovered that my worth wasn't determined by what I could provide financially or otherwise, but was inherent and unchangeable. Most importantly, I had realized that sometimes the family we need isn't necessarily the one we're born into, but the one we create through genuine connections based on mutual respect and care. The joint account that had once been a symbol of my family's financial dependence remained closed. In its place, I had opened a personal investment account, redirecting the money I had previously sent home toward my own future. It was a tangible representation of my commitment to valuing myself, to recognizing that my needs mattered too. My laptop chimed with Alicia's incoming call. Before answering, I took a moment to acknowledge how far I had come. 6 months ago, I had been locked in a pattern of giving financially while accepting emotional scraps in return. I had been defined by my family's narrative, seen through the distorted lens of their expectations and judgments. Now, I was the author of my own story, setting the terms of my relationships and honoring my own worth. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, nights spent questioning whether I had been too harsh, too final in my boundaries. There had been painful conversations and difficult realizations. There had been grieving for the family relationships I had wanted but never had. But through it all, I had maintained the clarity that came on that Christmas Eve, sitting in my rental car outside my childhood home. I deserved better than to be an ATM disguised as a daughter. I deserved to be valued for who I was, not what I could provide. And if those closest to me couldn't offer that basic respect, I had the right, perhaps even the responsibility, to create distance until they could. As I clicked to accept Delicia's call, her smiling face filling my screen, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for most of my adult life. I was no longer seeking validation from people unwilling to give it. I was no longer funding my own exclusion. I was living authentically, guided by self-respect rather than the desperate hope for approval that had driven me for so long. The greatest gift I had given myself that Christmas wasn't the boundary setting or the financial separation, though both were necessary. It was the recognition that love shouldn't cost your dignity, that family is about mutual support, not one-way exploitation, that sometimes walking away is the only path to moving forward. I had come home for the holidays and been told I wasn't invited, that gatherings were for family only. In the painful aftermath of that rejection, I had found something more valuable than inclusion in a toxic system. I had found myself. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to establish clear boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage in your own.